Hi there, welcome to Correct with Copper. Today we're looking at 3 ways of channel setting beads into your wirework. And if you want to see more techniques and tutorials like this one, hit that subscribe button. Now let's get channel setting. Channel setting is a jewellery term used for a row of stones set with a frame either side. For wirework, this is a wire either side. And in addition to the aesthetic, the advantage for your wirework pieces is that the wires give some protection to the beads. In this tutorial, we're going to look at 3 different ways to do channel setting. They each have slightly different attributes, and you can therefore choose which fits best into any particular project. For materials, you'll need the beads you want to channel set. Small beads work best, and you can experiment with different shapes. I'll use rounds and rondelles in this video. You need your frame wires. I'd recommend anything between 0.8 and 1.6mm, which is 14 to 20 gauge. And you need some weaving wire, and I'd recommend 0.25 to 0.4mm, which is 26 to 30 gauge. And don't forget to check that it fits through your beads before you start. For the samples in this video, I'm going to use 1mm or 18 gauge for the frame wires, and 0.4mm, which is 26 gauge, for the weaving wires. This standard channel setting is the most commonly used method, and it's woven with 1 wire. You might already have the 2 base wires and 1 weaving wire coming from a piece that you've already started, but if not, you just need to anchor on the weaving wire by wrapping a few times, and coil up to where you want the first bead. Then thread on your bead, and take the weaving wire across to the other frame wire. Now my weaving wires come over the top of that first frame wire, so I'm going to take it down and underneath the second frame wire that I've just added in. Then I'll coil on that second frame wire, wrapping enough to clear the bead that I've just added, and then wrapping a few more times to get up to where I want to add the next bead. You can check where this needs to be by placing the bead between the 2 frame wires. And you can make this so the beads are touching, or coil a couple more times and have small spaces between the beads. I'm happy with where that's sitting, so I'll then take the weaving wire over to the other side and down between the 2 frame wires, and then coil again on the first wire up to the point where I want to add the next bead. And you just need to continue coiling and adding beads to the length that you want. Now with rondelles, because I'm weaving down between the wires, the rondelles will tilt slightly, and each alternate bead will tilt the other way. This won't matter with round beads, but it's just worth knowing in case you don't like that look with the beads that you've chosen. If you're channel setting a curve, to keep the beads looking even, you need to coil the outer wire more than the inner wire. So it's best to make the curve first before you start the weaving. Now for the straight section of this sample, I coiled 9 times between each bead. So for this curve, I'm actually coiling 7 times on the inner wire, adding my bead, moving across and down to the outer wire, and then I'll coil that 11 times. But the exact number of coils will depend on your beads and the curve that you're making, so you just need to check as you go along. And once I've added a few more beads on the curve, you can see they're sitting next to each other in the same way as they did on the straight section. The ladder channel setting method uses 2 weaving wires. So instead of alternate coils, the sides are both coiled all the way along. You do need to get 2 wires through each of the beads though, so it's worth checking before you start. So I'll start this by coiling one of the weaving wires on one of the frame wires, and then the other weaving wire on the other frame wire. And uncoiling this so both of the weaving wires are going over the top of the frame wire inwards once those two frame wires are together. I'm then going to add my first bead, and I'll thread it onto one of the weaving wires in one direction, and then I'll take the other weaving wire through the bead in the other direction so they're crossing in the middle. Then take the weaving wires through that bead, so the bead will then settle between the two frame wires. And as those two weaving wires have gone over the top of the frame wires, going into the bead, I want them coming under the frame wires as they come out of the bead. I'll then just coil up each of the frame wires again with the weaving wire that's on that side to the point where I want to add the next bead. So it's basically the same as the standard channel setting, but you're working with two weaving wires simultaneously. And one of the advantages of this setting is that rondelles will sit straight rather than slightly tilted over, as with the standard method. So once I've coiled to where I want the next bead to go, I'll thread that on in the same way as before, crossing those two weaving wires over, and down under the frame wires to then coil on either side again. And continue for the length that you want. And to work the ladder channel setting around a curve, in the same way as the standard channel setting, you'll need to coil the outer wire more times than the inner frame wire. So once again, you should first shape the frame wires into the curve that you want, and then coil the frame wires to where you want the bead to be, and just add on a few more coils on the outer wire. And check that the bead sits next to the previous one in the same way as on the straight. And again, there's no magic number of coils for this, it depends entirely on the size of your beads and the curve that you're making. And I'll just fix that last bead into place. And you can see the beads are sitting tightly next to each other around the curve, in the same way as on the straight. This final method is called the centre wire channel setting, because it uses an extra wire in the middle of the channel that the beads are threaded onto. This orientates the bead in the other direction to the last two settings, and it's great if you want to use a fine weaving wire but are concerned that this will hold the beads securely. Or if you're working with a copper design but have translucent beads and don't want the wire to show through the bead, you can thread them onto, say, silver wire, which I think I'll do here. You can add the beads as you go, or pre-thread them onto the wire, and I'll do that. And I find that makes things a little bit easier. Just put a small wrap loop on the end of the wire to hold the beads. And once I've threaded on the beads, I'll wrap a loop on the other end as well. Now this method uses one weaving wire, and I'll just wrap that a few times around one of the frame wires to attach it. And then I'll put all of the wires in the positions that they want to be in. Now the main aim for the weave in this method is to fix the bead wire in position. As I'm starting with that wire coming over that first frame wire, I'm going to take it under the bead wire and then over the second frame wire. I'm then going to wrap that second frame wire once all the way round, and then the second time I wrap, I'll come back and I'll go over the bead wire and under the first frame wire. I'll then wrap that first frame wire one full time, and then the second time I'm weaving under that bead wire and over the second frame wire. And I'm just going to do this a few times back and forth, but you can continue this weave in your design up to where you want the first bead to be in the channel setting. And as you can see, that's holding the bead wire quite securely in the middle of that channel. So then I'll put my first bead into position, and I just want to coil that first frame wire a few times to get to the other side of the bead. I'll then take the weaving wire under the bead wire, over the second frame wire, around for one full wrap, and then on the second wrap round, I'm weaving back over the bead wire and under the first frame wire. I can then put the second bead into position and coil a few times on that first frame wire to get past that second bead. I'm then going to weave over in exactly the same way as I've done before. And I'm just going to continue adding beads in this way and weaving over to the second frame wire and back again between each bead. Now this channel setting is probably easier to do in the middle of a project than on a sample like this. And to get it neat, it's better if you can keep a bit of tension on that bead wire. So that's the wire that's sitting straight, and the weaving wire is the one that's curving up and down between it. So then you just need to continue with the weaving and coiling up to the length that you want. Now I've just chosen to put 2 weaves between each bead, but you could put more on if you wanted the beads further apart. And the advantage with this method is that you can curve it after weaving. You don't need to alter the number of coils to get around the curve. And that's 3 methods for channel setting beads into your projects with wire wrapping. I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, please press the like button. And don't forget you can subscribe to my channel and head over to my website for more hints, tips and projects. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.